John Kennedy got kicked out of a Chicago restaurant by a furious manager. Then this happened as the evening breeze carried a sharp chill through the city, and John Kennedy, the seasoned senator from Louisiana, stepped onto the bustling sidewalk of Chicago's upscale dining district, his broad frame showing traces of fatigue after a long day of meetings, though his warm, approachable demeanor remained untouched. The soft glow of streetlights danced on the polished windows of Giovanni's, a restaurant celebrated for its refined elegance, and Kennedy, wearing a neatly pressed gray suit with a subtle checkered pattern, loosened his tie and pushed open the heavy glass door as the chime above announced his arrival. Inside, the dining room hummed with quiet sophistication. Clinking china murmured conversations. Crystal chandeliers casting a golden glow over mahogany tables draped in crisp white linens, and the faint aroma of roasted garlic and fresh herbs wafting from the kitchen, creating an atmosphere of understated luxury favored by Chicago's elite. Kennedy's presence drew a few curious glances from diners who recognized his distinctive Southern charm. But he sought only a quiet meal, a brief escape from his demanding public life. The young hostess Maria greeted him with a professional smile and guided him to a small table near the center of the room, handing him a leather-bound menu as Kennedy nodded his thanks and scanned the dining room filled with well-dressed business couples, celebratory diners, and a few tourists. Nearby sat an elderly man later introduced as Frank, his thinning silver hair, trembling hands, worn tweed jacket, and hunched posture making him seem out of place as he struggled to read the elegant script of dishes, like herb-crusted lamb and truffle risotto in the dim light. Kennedy noticed Frank's difficulty and felt a familiar tug of empathy shaped by years of listening to stories of struggle. So he leaned over and warmly offered help, remarking that the print was small in the lighting. Frank looked up, surprised and grateful, admitting his eyes were not what they used to be. And Kennedy smiled, slid his chair closer, and patiently read the evening specials aloud, describing pan-seared scallops and wild mushroom ravioli while answering questions about flavors and portions. Frank's face brightened as their conversation drifted to his love for old jazz records, prompting a shared smile when Kennedy recalled a lively music festival in New Orleans, creating a quiet pocket of connection in the formal dining room as Maria watched from her station, feeling warmth in her chest and seeing in Kennedy's gesture the same care her grandfather once showed at their family's small diner. But not everyone shared her sentiment, as Margaret Sullivan, the restaurant's manager, observed from near the bar with sharp eyes narrowing. In her mid-40s, Margaret was a commanding figure, her black blazer tailored to perfection and her auburn hair pulled into a tight bun. And for 5 years, she had run Giovanni with unwavering precision, ensuring every detail from the alignment of silverware to the timing of service helped her vision of elegance. To her, Kennedy's interaction with Frank was a disruption, a violation of the unspoken rules that kept Giovanni distinct from casual eateries, and her pale cheeks flushed as she straightened her heels and moved toward the tables, clicking against the hardwood floor, determined to restore order. Margaret did not recognize Kennedy as a senator. To her, he was simply a patron threatening her carefully curated atmosphere. And having handled similar situations before, she approached as the room's energy shifted and conversations quieted. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice tight with controlled irritation, instructing him to keep conversations to his own table and reminding him this was a fine dining establishment, not a social hall. Her words startled Kennedy and Frank, as nearby diners paused mid-bite and the room grew hushed, all eyes on the unfolding scene. Kennedy remained composed, apologizing calmly and explaining he was only helping Frank with the menu. But Margaret's jaw tightened as her authority felt challenged. Frank spoke up, his trembling voice firm as he explained Kennedy had only been kind, drawing nods from a few nearby tables. Yet Margaret's frustration grew as attention mounted and she reiterated the standards of the restaurant. Kennedy, hands resting calmly on the table, gently responded that sometimes helping someone mattered more than formality, and asked if making people feel welcome was not the purpose of such a place. His words resonating with diners, including a woman who nodded quietly. Frank, a regular since his wife's passing, felt a spark of warmth from the kindness, while Maria watched from her station, torn between duty and values. Sensing control slipping, Margaret raised her voice and delivered an ultimatum, stating that if he could not follow the guidelines, he would need to leave. Drawing gasps as the dining room became a stage for a clash between compassion and control. Kennedy rose, his movements deliberate and his expression one of quiet resolve, and said he would respect her request while hoping she would think about what truly made a place special. He turned to Frank with a warm smile, telling him it was a pleasure. And Frank's eyes glistened as he nodded, his gratitude unspoken but palpable. As Kennedy gathered his coat, the room remained hushed, diners watching with a mix of sympathy and admiration, while Margaret followed him toward the door, her heels clicking like a metronome, and Maria stood with trembling hands, wanting to speak but held back by fear. The elegant decor of Giovanni felt hollow now, its beauty overshadowed by the drama within its walls. And as Kennedy stepped toward the exit, the seeds of a transformation were planted, setting the stage for a reckoning that would challenge hearts and redefine what it meant to dine at Giovanni. The air in the dining room grew thick with tension as Margaret Sullivan's demand for John Neely Kennedy to leave hung like a guillotine over the once elegant atmosphere, while the senator stood calmly by his table with his suit jacket draped over one arm, his expression serene despite the public reprimand. His dark eyes meeting Margaret's briefly in search of understanding, only to find her face set in resolve. The clinking of silverware had ceased, replaced by murmurs and whispers as diners leaned toward one another, some discreetly capturing the moment on their phones, others simply staring, caught in the gravity of what was unfolding. Frank sat frozen at his table, his weathered hands clutching the edge of the white tablecloth as the warmth of their earlier conversation dissolved under the weight of Margaret's authority, leaving a chill behind. Margaret straightened her posture further, her black blazer as crisp as her tone, and reiterated sharply that the establishment had standards and that Kennedy's behavior was disrupting other guests, insisting he leave immediately, her words carrying the conviction of years spent enforcing her vision of perfection. To her, Kennedy's act was not kindness, but a breach of decorum, a crack in the polished facade she had built, and unaware of who he was, she believed no one was above the rules. Kennedy, hands folded calmly, took a slow breath, his composure shaped by years in the Senate, and replied respectfully that he understood she was doing her job, but had only tried to help someone in need, adding that if such help was a disruption, he was sorry she saw it that way. His tone was measured, devoid of anger, yet carried a quiet strength that made several diners nod in silent agreement as a young couple nearby exchanged glances, reflecting admiration and unease. The woman with auburn hair catching the chandelier's glow, whispering that he was only being kind and questioning why it was such a big deal, while her partner and a man in a navy blazer watched Kennedy with focused respect. Frank, emboldened by Kennedy's calm resolve, spoke up again, his trembling voice resolute as he gestured toward Kennedy and said the man had done nothing wrong, only helping an old man in need, and if that violated the rules, then perhaps the rules needed another look. His soft words landing with surprising force and drawing murmurs of approval. A businessman dining alone leaned forward with interest, while Margaret's jaw tightened as she felt her authority challenged not only by Kennedy, but now by another patron. The once refined dining room transforming into an unexpected stage of confrontation. Maria stood frozen at her station near the entrance, heart pounding as her hands fidgeted with her clipboard. torn between loyalty to her job and the feeling that Margaret's reaction was unjust. Her thoughts drifting to her upbringing where hospitality meant care, not just service, and Kennedy's kindness reminding her of her father at their family diner, making her stomach churn as she saw that spirit punished. She caught the uneasy expression of David, a server of 6 months, his usual smile gone as he mechanically refilled water glasses and avoided Margaret's gaze. Sensing the room turning against her, Margaret raised her voice and crossed her arms, declaring she was not there to argue, but to maintain the experience guests expected, and that if it could not be respected, Kennedy was not welcome, her final words sending a ripple through the room as diners gasped. A middle-aged woman with a pearl necklace, openly disapproving and murmuring it was harsh. Others echoing the sentiment in a low hum of dissent, while a discreet phone continued recording. And Kennedy remained standing, adjusting his jacket over his arm with deliberate, unhurried movements. "I understand you've got a job to do," he said, his voice steady, adding that he hoped she would consider how sometimes a little kindness went further than any rulebook. His simple yet profound words hanging in the air and resonating with diners watching with bated breath as a nearby businessman nodded vigorously and pulled out his phone to type a quick note. Frank looked up at Kennedy with eyes glistening with unshed emotion, telling him softly that he did not deserve this and had only been decent. And Kennedy placed a gentle hand on Frank's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and respect, assuring him it was all right and that it had been a pleasure meeting him. The dining room seemed to hold its breath as Kennedy turned toward the exit, his steps measured and dignified, with Margaret following a few paces behind, her heels clicking in a rhythm more like a march than an escort, while servers including David paused in their tasks to watch him pass. Maria stood at her station with a lump rising in her throat, wanting to call out and defend him, but remaining silent out of fear, her trembling hands clutching her clipboard as memories of her family's values clashed with the cold professionalism of Giovanni's, making the elegant decor feel hollow. As Kennedy reached the door, he paused and turned back, his gaze sweeping the room and meeting diners' eyes filled with sympathy and admiration. And he thanked them for their hospitality with quiet sincerity, the irony not lost on the crowd. The woman with the pearl necklace stood and began to clap slowly, calling out praise and declaring he had shown more class than the place deserved, sparking nods and murmurs of support as a businessman slipped an extra bill to a server with a whispered note of appreciation. Margaret's face flushed deeper as she sensed the room turning against her, realizing her authority had sparked a quiet rebellion, whispers of unfair and heartless spreading as her phone buzzed unnoticed in her pocket. Kennedy pushed open the glass door, the chime ringing like a final note, and stepped into the cool Chicago air, standing for a moment with his breath visible in the chill, his heart heavy with rejection yet buoyed by the knowledge that he had done right by Frank. Inside the dining room, normalcy struggled to return as diners resumed their conversations, though the energy was altered, tinged with unease and reflection. Frank sat alone at his table, staring at the menu he could barely read, his appetite gone, the warmth of Kennedy's kindness lingering alongside the sting of seeing it punished. Maria remained at her station, wiping a tear from her cheek as her resolve hardened while she watched Margaret return to the bar, her movements brisk but unsteady. David approached Frank with a glass of water and gently asked if there was anything he could get him, only for Frank to shake his head and reply that nothing would help unless he could bring that man back, his disappointment landing on David like a quiet rebuke. Behind the bar, Margaret busied herself with straightening bottles that did not need it, replaying the confrontation in her mind as a small voice questioned her actions before pride pushed it aside, reminding her of the sophisticated image she had built at Giovanni, even as she noticed disapproving glances, hesitant servers, and the weight of judgment settling over her. Unbeknownst to her, A video captured by a diner was already spreading online, with the hashtag #JovanasFail beginning to trend as strangers weighed in on the injustice, setting the stage for a reckoning that would challenge her rigid worldview and highlight Kennedy's quiet grace. Outside, the Chicago night wrapped John Nye Kennedy in a cool embrace as he stood on the sidewalk, the restaurant's warm glow spilling onto the pavement while city sounds pulsed around him. And though rejection weighed on his heart, his years in the Senate reminded him that such moments often carried the seeds of something greater. Inside, Giovanni's restless whispers continued about the senator's ejection, while Frank stared at his untouched plate, the warmth of their brief connection lingering with sorrow. And Maria, nearing the end of her shift, finally found the courage to act, slipping off her name tag, grabbing her coat, and hurrying toward the glass door as the chime echoed and she called out, asking him to please wait. Asterisk, she called softly, her voice cutting through the urban noise as she spotted Kennedy standing beneath a streetlight, his silhouette framed against the city's glow, and he turned, his dark eyes softening with recognition as he greeted her warmly, recalling her name. Gathering her resolve, Maria told him that what he had done inside was right. That helping Frank and showing kindness was not wrong regardless of what Margaret had said. Her words spilling out with conviction. Kennedy smiled gently and thanked her, saying that sometimes doing the right thing stirred a little dust, but was worth it if it helped someone feel seen. Their exchange was interrupted by the chime of the restaurant door as Dr. William Patterson, a retired theology professor, stepped onto the sidewalk, his silver hair catching the streetlight and his purposeful stride carrying quiet authority. And he introduced himself, expressing admiration for Kennedy's kindness and grace as a living example of compassion in action. Kennedy shook his hand humbly, deflecting praise, but Patterson insisted that he had not merely helped a man read a menu. He had given him dignity, an act powerful enough to shift hearts. Maria stood stunned as she realized Kennedy was a senator, the recognition deepening the moment and making it feel guided by something beyond chance as the three formed a small circle on the sidewalk, the city's chaos fading behind them. Frank soon appeared in the doorway, his frail frame carried by determination as he said he could not stay inside, and thanked Kennedy for making him feel like he mattered again, prompting Kennedy to clasp his shoulder and reply sincerely that no one should feel alone in a room full of people. The conversation deepened as Frank spoke of his late wife Mary and her belief in kindness as a universal language, telling Kennedy she would have loved him, while Kennedy responded with a humble chuckle. Patterson reflected that this was the lesson he had taught for decades. That compassion changed not only the recipient but everyone who witnessed it, and Maria listened, inspired, feeling her long-held dream of becoming a social worker rooted in care and service draw closer than ever. Inside, Margaret's phone buzzed relentlessly as notifications piled up about the viral video, with #JovanasFail trending and strangers condemning her actions. Her hands trembling as doubt crept in and the memory of the senator's calm replayed in her mind. The dining room's elegance felt hollow now, her staff's uneasy glances and diners' disapproval weighing heavily as the stage was set for a transformation that would challenge her rigid worldview and reveal the enduring power of Kennedy's grace. The Chicago night seemed to pause when the glass door chimed again, announcing the unexpected return of John Nye Kennedy, who stepped back into the restaurant with his suit jacket buttoned and his demeanor as calm and composed as before, followed by Maria, Dr. William Patterson, and Frank, their presence a quiet testament to the bond formed outside. Several diners lingered or returned, faces marked by curiosity and anticipation. And the dining room fell silent as all eyes turned toward the group, silverware stilled and murmurs fading. Margaret stood frozen behind the bar, gripping the polished wood as her phone buzzed endlessly beside the abandoned hashtag on the counter, each alert a reminder of the storm she had unleashed. loose strands of auburn hair betraying a crumbling facade of authority. Kennedy approached with measured steps, his gentle gaze meeting Margaret's as diners held their breath, unsure whether confrontation or something else would follow. He spoke softly in his Louisiana drawl, saying he had come back because the evening was about more than what had happened earlier, not about him or Frank, but about what kind of place Giovanni should be and what kind of world they wished to build together. His words free of judgment and landing like a bomb on Margaret's wounded pride. Maria stood behind him with tears welling, moved by his grace, while Dr. Patterson recognized a living sermon unfolding and Frank nodded quietly, his presence steady. As Margaret's throat tightened, and she whispered in disbelief that he had come back after what she had done. The question trembled in the air, heavy with confusion and the first stirrings of vulnerability, as Margaret realized that for years she had built her identity on control and strict rules to keep Giovanni's a beacon of sophistication. Yet faced with Kennedy's unwavering kindness, those foundations began to shake. Her voice cracked as she admitted she thought she was protecting the place, but had instead turned kindness into a problem and made it feel cold. Her raw confession echoing through the dining room and drawing gasps from diners who had stayed to witness the moment. The woman with the pearl necklace dabbed her eyes. David stood frozen with his forgotten tray, and Kennedy stepped closer with genuine compassion, telling Margaret that everyone makes mistakes and what mattered was what came next. That she had a chance to make the restaurant more than a place to eat, but a home for people who needed it. His simple words stirred memories of Margaret's childhood, when her grandmother welcomed neighbors into a small kitchen without concern for status or rules, and that long-buried warmth began to crack the armor she had worn for years. Frank then stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, and gently told her that Kennedy's kindness had meant everything to him, reminding her of his late wife Mary's belief that love comes back around if you let it in. His words striking Margaret with the force of a revelation. Tears filled her eyes as she took Frank's trembling hand, and the dining room, once a stage for conflict, transformed into a sanctuary beneath the soft glow of chandeliers. Margaret's shoulders shook as she sobbed and apologized openly to Kennedy, to Frank, and to everyone present for choosing rules over heart, her unguarded remorse moving the diners deeply. A businessman began to clap, joined by others, until the room filled with applause that felt like a celebration of grace, while Maria stepped forward through tears to say that this, not the decor or fine plates, was what made a place special. And Dr. Patterson added that the night was a living reminder of what happens when compassion is chosen over control. Senator Kennedy didn't just help a man read a menu, Dr. Patterson said, his voice carrying the weight of theological insight. He showed us that kindness can shift hearts even in the hardest moments. And you, Margaret, you're showing us it's never too late to change. His words framed the evening as a moment of redemption, a living case study of how grace operates amid the machines of human interaction. Kennedy, ever humble, shook his head slightly, deflecting the praise. "I'm just a fellow who tried to do right," he said with a warm smile. "But I'm glad we're all here figuring out what comes next together." Margaret, her face streaked with tears, straightened, a new determination shining in her eyes. "I want to make this right," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "Not just for tonight, but for every night. This place, it's going to be about people, not just plates." She turned to Maria, her expression softening. "Maria, you've got a heart for hospitality. I want you to help me make this place a home for folks like Frank, people who need more than a meal." Maria's eyes widened, her heart racing at the unexpected recognition. "I'd be honored, ma'am," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Frank, standing beside Kennedy, smiled, his weathered face radiant with joy. "My Mary would have loved this," he said softly. "She always said, a meal's only as good as the love you share with it. He reached for Margaret's hand, squeezing it gently, sealing a moment of forgiveness and understanding. The dining room erupted in applause, not just for Kennedy's kindness or Margaret's repentance, but for the collective realization that they had witnessed something rare, a moment where human connection triumphed over division. The servers who had been watching from the sidelines stepped forward, pride evident on their faces. David set down his tray, his earlier guilt replaced by hope. Diners, many capturing the night on their phones, began sharing not just the video of the confrontation, but the story of its resolution, with the hashtag #KindnessMatters overtaking hashtag #GIOVAN-is-fail. Social media filled with praise for Kennedy's grace and Margaret's courage, along with strangers sharing their own stories of kindness. In the weeks that followed, Giovanni's transformed. Margaret instituted weekly community dinners for seniors, encouraging staff to sit and converse with guests, ensuring no one dined alone. Frank became a regular, not only as a patron, but as a greeter, welcoming newcomers with the same warmth Kennedy had shown him. Maria, now assistant manager, brought her family's values of hospitality into her role, making sure every guest felt seen and valued. Dr. Patterson began hosting informal discussions in the private dining room, using the evening as a case study in compassion and redemption. Kennedy, back in Louisiana, continued his work. Yet the story of that night followed him, shared by countless people touched by his quiet strength. The lesson was clear. Kindness, grace, and human connection can transform even the most rigid of hearts. Kindness, when offered without expectation, has the power to heal, to connect, and to transform even the most rigid hearts. It is a choice we face every day, to build walls or bridges, to cling to rules or embrace our shared humanity. The world, it seems, is always watching, waiting for us to choose love over pride. And in those choices, we shape not only our own stories, but the communities we call home.